Hello and welcome to the Amplifier Podcast, the show where the best in business discuss how you can grow your business best. I'm Wyatt McPherson, I produce this show, and this week our host Don Cooper is speaking with Randy Long for his first of 3 episodes with us. Randy is the founder and CEO of Long Business Advisors and author of The Braveheart Exit and Bulletproof Your Exit, all of which are built and designed to aid in a smooth transition and exit from your business. Don and Randy discuss how important it is to plan your exit from your business, when the right time to do it is, the best ways of going about it, and ultimately how you can and should start to plan out something that many entrepreneurs unfortunately fail to realize the importance of until it is too late. It is a fantastic conversation that deals with not often talked about business topics, so make sure you check out our other 2 episodes with Randy and subscribe so you don't miss any in the future. But with all of that said, I truly do hope that you enjoy this episode of the Amplifier Podcast. Now please take it away, Don.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cooper. Today, I am happy to have a special guest for you, Mr. Randy Long. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Randy, and then we're going to dive into a conversation around how to plan for your business to be more successful. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our time together.
So I got to ask, and I've got a quirky reason for this and a little surprise for you, but why is your book and your process called the Braveheart process?
The Braveheart comes from a couple of things. One of them is my heritage happens to be British. Well, I should say British Empire anyways, put it that way. Scotland, England. And I love the story of the whole William Wallace thing. Secondly, I called it the Braveheart process because in America, I've always seen business owners as heroes because America became the engine of the world based on the fact that it was the best place in the world to create and become an entrepreneur and have the opportunity to do so. Because it was at a time when most of the world, it was very difficult to create new businesses. So it was on the back of these guys that get up every day, these guys and gals get up every day and they do the work, they hire the people, they write the checks, they sign the checks, and they only get the checks after everybody else is paid. So to me, those people are heroes, and I have really dedicated my practice, my life's work to serving business owners across the board. That's what I do.
That whole idea of that American mindset. And when I say American mindset, I think it's an entrepreneurial mindset. Our mutual friend, Dan Sullivan, has a podcast called The American Checklist, and he has the 8 mindsets of what it means to be American, not as a citizen, but as a mindset of freedom. And I think William Wallace stands for freedom. Obviously in the movie Braveheart, he says, you can take our lives, but you'll never take our freedom.
That's
so
right.
I have a surprise for you. My wife happens to be Scottish. And so she says she's Scottish first and British second. They've always got that rivalry that goes back to William Wallace.
It does.
And so in our household, we're both Canadian, and I've got all of my heritage is British. According to Ancestry, I'm 97% Irish and 3% Scottish. And my wife is like 90-some% Scottish and 3% Irish. I do think I got a little bit of English in there because I think I found one ancestor that was back in England, but the British Empire. So in our household, we try our best culturally in our family to make sure that we maintain some of our cultural roots, and we go to Highland games and we do things like that. As a matter of fact, when we were married, we had 27 people at our wedding in kilts and attire. So after reading about your book and watching a bunch of your videos, I decided to give you 2 surprises.
Okay.
First is I'm wearing my kilt today. So here I am.
Yes, you are. My gosh, it's so true.
This kilt, I had this made for my wedding. It's my family colors, the Cooper tartan.
Yeah.
And on the 10-year anniversary of my innovator business, which was a couple of years ago, my team gave me a special present, and it's my sword.
Oh my gosh.
So I have my kilt and my innovator sword that actually has my name embossed on it. So I will be today your symbolic William Wallace. But anyway, I'm wearing my kilt today in honor of you and your book. What I find interesting about what you do and in diving into your work as an entrepreneur, and I think as entrepreneurs and business owners everywhere, we're so focused on building our business and growing our business. And when someone says transition plan or succession plan, you go, well, yeah, I'll deal with that later because I got no plans on selling, and I'm going to, of course, and as entrepreneurs, we think we'll live forever, right?
Yep.
As I was reading and watching your work, it struck me today like a ton of bricks. It ain't about what I want. It isn't about what I'm planning to not do. It's about what will happen or what could happen if I don't plan.
Like we always say, everybody's going to exit their business. The question is whether or not you're going to exit well.
I literally today don't, and I get this from my own coaches like Dan Sullivan, that I don't ever plan to retire. Because I just love what I do. And, but that doesn't mean I won't exit some of the businesses. And I may want to monetize some businesses or some parts of the business over time, and setting it up properly is so key. But that part was good for me. But the part that really hit me and why I really love your profile and what you talked about is this idea of family. In my businesses, I wear my core values every day. It's the only, I have many of these shirts, but it's the only shirt I wear every day at work to really emphasize the core values of what my companies stand for and who we are. Yeah. But my number one core value is family first. The rest of my core values are built upon that we look after each other, we take care of each other, we take care of our own. And you've got this, your whole practice is around obviously, helping create legacy, but protecting the family. So
that's right.
Let's dive in. And, I just think this is, I went from, not having thought about this at all to having spent the entire day before we started talking intrigued about what you're doing. And it really got my gears turning because, my purpose, amongst other things, I've defined a 25-year purpose for what I want to do. My life's work is to help people. But who those people are, I want to build a group of companies to help 5,000 of my innovator amplifier families have great lives. Want to help a variety of clients, from entrepreneurs to salespeople to energy and industrial companies, accomplish different things.
Right.
But my number one purpose on that for the part that I want out of that is my wife, my 4 children, and my mom. I want to protect them and give them a life and security. And so, through my work, right? And so, the part that strikes me about your work, it wasn't so much about me, how comfortable will I be when I exit, or how will I exit? I really think that's all important. But, the part that struck home for me was, how do I do all of this? And how do my listeners do all of this as business owners to protect their families for whatever happens?
Right. That's right. Yeah. We call it, it's like two sides of the coin. One is planning for the exit. The other is doing the contingency planning, because what your desired exit isn't necessarily the one you're going to get. Now, It's true that a lot of times what you plan for, you do eventually get. But in the world we live in, things happen. People get in accidents, they get strokes, people die early and when they're not supposed to. So we plan for all those things because we, as business owners and fathers, and husbands, we have this duty to our wives and our children and our grandchildren. I have 6 grandkids already. And so I have this duty for me that I want to pass down, not just my assets, but I want to pass down my faith, my family, my freedom. I want them to identify strongly and have a culture from within my family, which makes, by the way, when my kids have all worked in my businesses, every one of them. Ellen is my business partner. She's my number 2 kid. It's been with me about 7 or 8 years now. She's incredibly gifted. She's the one, you met her before the show.
Yes.
So all of my kids have worked but they all fit because they've been acculturated, from inside of my family.
Yeah. I find that interesting. My oldest boy worked in one of my businesses from age 16 till about age 23 or 4. Now he's trying to be an entrepreneur on his own.
Yep.
And so he now has me coaching him in his business, which is a lot of fun, right? And now my second oldest son, he hasn't lived with me for a long time, and he moved back in with us about 6 months ago. That's been a joy for us to reconnect in a really deep daily level. What was really profound for me in that is he had a very different culture at his mother's house, and then coming to our house and spending time with me every day was a very different way of thinking. And I think it's been great for me, but I think it's been great for him to think about things and the influences and the things I do, the things I read, and just having a really positive impact on him. And my youngest daughter, she's in my office every day, and talking about business and talking about teamwork and talking about innovation and ideas. And so I have the impact that you have on your children in terms of the cultural impact that you have inside of your family with your beliefs and your values is so important.
It's also, from my perspective, the foundation of society, because when we remove those things from the kids, they turn into little criminals,
Yeah. Yeah, I love one of those pictures you had on one of your videos of your daughter with the little kid who hadn't been guided right, and he was holding a plastic gun and a knife. Like they're going to be, if you don't create their values and their culture, it gets created for them.
It does.
One of our mutual friends, Jason Corman, works with helping us create these intentional cultures.
Right.
And in all the time I've spent with Jason and in studying just business culture. And I think it applies to any culture is, cultures evolve and happen, organically and, or intentionally if you choose. And so That's inside of your family and inside of your business, you have to decide the culture and the values you want to be intentional about, or they become something that just happens organically, not necessarily in a positive way.
Yeah. They pick them up. Wherever they're going to pick them up, you either give them yours or they get somebody else's. So,
yeah, if they don't get, for your children, particularly, from youth onwards, as soon as they go to school, if they're not getting cultural values from you, they're getting it at school from whoever they hang out with.
Right. Which is a scary thing.
It can be, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Particularly when they hit about 12.5 years old. Right. Then if you haven't built some foundation by then, you've got a lot of work to do.
So true.
So Randy, many business owners never think about selling their business or about that whole transition. So what really happens when they don't?
Well, unfortunately, sad things happen a lot of times. As an example, there's a guy that contacted me about 3 years ago who had an electrical business. He was an electrician and had, crews and everything. He grossed about $4 million, and he was 70. He reached his 70th birthday and didn't have anybody, to take over. So he just closed it. I mean, this guy, I said, you closed it? He said, yeah. I said, well, what was your net income, your EBITDA? And he said, well, my last year it was $750,000. I said, dude, you probably left $1.5 million to $4 million on the table, depending on how you run the company. He's like, well, I just didn't think it was worth anything. That's because knowledge is, this, knowledge is power, and too many people don't know. And so, there's bad things can happen both on the contingency side. I'm not prepared for things. And so bad things happen. And then you lose the business and you lose the value of your life's work without your family benefiting from it. So planning on the positive side and planning on the contingency side, they're both very important. Very important.
I'm going to give a big shout out to one of my friends over in London, England. His name is James Bayless. He and his wife Emma own an electrical contracting business in the city of London. And so, James, if you're listening to this, listen to what Randy's telling you, because you and Emma and the boys need to hear this. I just connect the dots when you said, an electrical contractor making really good money. He wanted to stop working, and he didn't understand the intrinsic value of his business or how to get value out of it when he could stop.
That's right.
That's amazing when you think about that. I mean, I certainly have more thinking about the value of the business than that, but a lot of people probably don't. They think that, and that definition a lot of the time, and I think Dan Sullivan says this, that there's entrepreneurs and then there's a mindset of a solopreneur where they have independence because they're their own employer, but they've created themselves a job. And maybe even if they've got a bunch of employees, if they think that the only way that they can continue to earn from their business is if they're in it, is an interesting mindset.
Yeah. Ultimately our goal for our clients is to, and this from my videos, but we like them to think about building a sellable business. So right. even if their plan is to transition it to their children, we still prefer to plan as though we're going to have to sell it to a third party. And the reason I like to do that is because when you plan for third party sales, you recognize that when the company comes in and wants to buy, they're going to send a due diligence team in, and they're going to look through that business. They're going to lift the skirt up and see all the ugly stuff and all the pretty stuff. And so we want to make sure when our people come in, somebody comes from the outside and they look under the hood there, we want to make sure that they find no surprises except good ones.
Now you say, in some of the things I've read and seen with you, that what if you sold your business today? What's it worth? And you had an example that was really intriguing about 3 different companies who had, and they had different levels of value created in their business. They were all very similar. Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, that was a talk I did, I think 4 years ago, maybe now, something like that, 3 or 4 years ago. But essentially, I used an example of 3 companies that had the same EBITDA, or in other words, the same net income, right? But those 3 companies, even though they all had the same net income and they were all roughly the same size and in the same industry, but one sold for like 3 times, another one sold for 5 to 7 times, and the one sold for 1 times earned, right? And
right.
Part of the reason was because the things that would make another company want you is, for instance, the growth rate. As an example, the one that had the highest multiple, they had 3 to 5 years of growing revenue on a really nice, projection. They also had a management team that was totally ran the business, and the business owner was not involved in the day-to-day operation of the business. So that meant somebody could buy the business and own it as is without having to come run it or to have to hire somebody to run it. So they knew it was an entity that could self-sustain. Those businesses bring the highest mark. And then the other one that was in the middle, they had a team. The business owner was still somewhat involved, and they didn't have quite the track record, but they were still positive. Things were going well. Whereas the other one, the owner made all the decisions. He was in charge of everything. And if the business failed, it would be because he failed, because it was all about him. He retained too much decision-making authority, and he became the prevention of growth,
right?
Because he was the stop.
Well, yeah, the buck stopped with him with failure, and equally from a value standpoint, the only way, there's a lot of risk in a buyer looking at that business to buy it if all the capability of the company is tied up in him and in his ability to keep performing. You called it the 3 value catalysts: management team, a diverse customer list so that you weren't leaning on one customer, and obviously that consistent and growing revenue streams.
Yeah, those are a few. There are a number more of those, but The point is that the reason businesses have value is because of how they're built and what they can accomplish. They're not just the idea that, somebody comes to me and says, oh, we don't need a valuation done because I know what it's worth. It's like, how do you know that? Well, the average in the industry is X. I was like, well, who told you you were average?
Yeah.
Businesses aren't sold on averages. They're sold on what your particularities are, not the averages. The only way they're sold at an average is if all of your particularities fit inside of that narrow band of average. Most people are either much higher or much lower, and there are some in the middle, of course, but you can't assume that because the industry averages 5 times earnings, that's what you're going to get. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've got entrepreneurial friends. I'm sure many, that, have a variety of spectrums. I've got friends who I've got one friend who has 5 businesses, and he cannot put his phone down, and he often can't even attend an entrepreneurial networking meeting because he has to run to site to fix something. He has to go to that office and deal with that supplier. He is the manager of all of them, makes all the decisions. He's very successful, but he works 80 hours a week. And he takes pride in that, and he's very successful financially, but he has no management team. He has no processes, and his customers are often big chunks of his company. And so all of his value is tied up in his ability. And so the value of exiting or transitioning or dealing with something, for him, he would be that lowest multiple factor. I've got other friends who have pretty good management team, but they don't have any processes. They don't have any system. I mean, it's all sort of in the head of the team. Right. And so there's no scalable and repeatable nature. And I coach a few of them like on the importance of process. What I find interesting there is the entrepreneurs like, well, I'm not big into processes. Yeah, but it's not, you're an entrepreneur. You can wing it. We all, as entrepreneurs, we often are all very adaptable, but you need to build the business so you don't have to be there. And so, the team and the processes are so important so that you can back away and focus on, as we know, working on the business and not having to be in it.
That's correct. And also, having the freedom, owning your time, that's a super deal, I mean,
Absolutely.
Then you can prioritize family or, charitable things you're doing or whatever it is. Everything isn't about serving. We want to serve our customers well, but at the end of the day, when you're at the end of your life and you're sitting around, you're not going to lament the fact that you didn't spend enough time at the office. That's just not going to happen.
Dan Sullivan says it's the 4 entrepreneurial freedoms, right? Freedom of time, freedom of purpose, freedom of relationship, and obviously freedom of money. That's so right. That, but money is a tool to make the best of those other 3 freedoms.
That's right.
I started working about 4 years ago on really focusing on working on the business and not in the businesses. And, and that instantly gave me a ton of freedom of time and relationship so that I can work on what I want to work on. I started another company as a result of creating that freedom. Yeah. And the freedom of time for family, it was just this morning, my wife was sort of wondering about going to this Scotland-England match I was telling you about. Right. And she was going to go on her own because my daughter was going to be in school and I had some things scheduled, and she was, on the fence, and she's been, somewhat isolated from that community throughout this whole COVID thing. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to go. And I looked at her and I said, well, what's holding you back? And she said, well, I don't want to go by myself. And you're tied up. And I said, well, I can fix that.
That's right.
And I literally, it was about 7:00 this morning, and I looked at my calendar and I said, well, what do I have going on next Friday afternoon? And I had a podcast scheduled. And so I emailed my assistant, Mallory, and I said, Mallory, can you move this podcast and try to make it a day earlier? I don't want to push it off because I want to make myself free for supporting Gemma going to this match. And what was so powerful about that is my wife went from uncertainty to G, to this giddy happiness, and now all of a sudden looking forward to it. And then that turned by 8 o'clock, it had turned into my daughter was coming and my 18-year-old was coming, and she was emailing the event organizer saying, I don't need one seat, I don't need two seats, I need 4 seats now. and all of a sudden her whole week is going to be about planning around how we're going to turn this into an experience. And it all happened simply because I had freedom of time.
Yeah.
Freedom of time created that freedom in relationship that's just so valuable.
Yeah, don't miss the true benefit of being an entrepreneur, which is the ability to create the times,
absolutely,
the freedoms, I mean, like you said.
And there you have it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Amplifier Podcast. If you would like to get in touch with Don or Randy at any point in time and discover more of what both of them can do for you and your business, then you can always find both of their links in the description of this episode. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating on this show. It truly does help us out a lot. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss any future episodes. With all of that said, though, I truly do hope that you've enjoyed this episode of the Amplifier Podcast, and we shall see you next time.